You're listening to the Greeks Gridiron, live with Ethan Haristodoulou.
Welcome back, everyone, to more of the Greeks Gridiron. I am Ethan Haristodoulou, and today on May 6th, 2022, we are getting into our Week 4 picks for the USFL. We got a lot of things to get into here, who we think is going to win, some of the betting odds, and my thoughts on those. Remember, I'm not giving gambling advice, just giving my thoughts on those gambles. And then also the Birmingham Stallions, some big stuff coming out late overnight regarding them, so we'll make sure to get into that once we get to their game. So as always, make sure you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and and comment down below. Who do you want to see win this weekend? Who do you think's going to win this weekend? But let's get into it. We will start with the first game that is going to happen tonight at 10 p.m. Eastern Time. We are looking at the Philadelphia Stars and the Michigan Panthers. The Stars and Panthers are both 1-2 coming into this game, looking for a win to get themselves back up to the 500 mark. And, you know, another team that actually had some pretty significant news break this week already, the Philadelphia Stars will be without quarterback Brian Scott for the foreseeable future. He was dealing with a knee injury after the game last week and ultimately decided he needs to step away to address the injury from the team. He does hope to come back, but right now it's the Case Cookus show at this point. He did a serviceable job, no real complaints, no touchdowns, no interceptions, 145 yards last week. I believe he missed like 4 or 5 passes. So overall, he had a pretty solid game in relief, but the offense did not really move too much as there wasn't a ton of ground effort behind him. So I think with the Philadelphia Stars this week, they need to get the ground game going a little bit more, try to get Case Cookus comfortable as the starting QB1 for this team now going forward. They do, though, need to be ready for this Panthers defense because for all the offensive struggles that this team has had defensively, they've been actually a very good unit, and they are ranked first in pass D, allowing only 114.3 yards a game. So that is something that they need to think about as they are going into this one here. Do they want to try to run the football maybe a little bit more as opposed to the pass where the Panthers have actually been pretty good at shutting it down? They haven't allowed a ton of points this year either. It's funny because the Panthers, they're sitting closer to the bottom of the league, but defensively, they are a really good team. It's just their passing offense has been very, very bad. Shea Patterson's going to get the start this week for the Panthers, so I think the Stars need to be aware of that and try to make him as uncomfortable in that pocket as possible to at least slow things down. Where on the Panthers side, when you're looking at them, they're coming off a big game last week against the Maulers. They won 24-0 despite 75 yards passing, 71 yards passing, something like that. But they shut out the Maulers 24-0 on a ground game that did about 245 yards of damage on the ground. The passing game, like I just mentioned, continues to be absent. Lynch actually did look pretty good, but since he got hurt, Patterson's going to be leading the way, at least for the foreseeable future now. I will be looking forward to seeing Lynch coming back because in the limited time he had before he got hurt, he actually operated the offense fairly well, and things looked good that first opening drive. I would say for this team, their key to success is going to be the ground game, so definitely look for the ground game led by Reggie Corbin last week, who had 20 carries for 133 yards and a touchdowns, to go up against the league's worst run defense, actually, funny enough, in the Philadelphia Stars, who are allowing 186 rushing yards on the ground per game. So with all that in mind, the Panthers being -1 favorites and the over-under sitting at 33.5 here, I think the Panthers at -1, considering the Brian Scott situation, I would probably think that these scales would be tipped the other direction. I kind of like the Panthers in this one, especially with how their defense matches up against the team that they're going against in the Stars. So I am going to go with the Panthers. I have them winning at a scoreline of 17-13. I don't think there's going to be a ton of offense here because, 1, the Panthers have not scored a ton, and 2, with Cookus under the helm, the Stars did not really move the ball too much themselves and put up too many points. I'm taking the under, 17-13, over-unders at 33.5, so the under for that one, but I do like the Panthers taking the win in this game here. Now, moving into game number 2. This one is at Saturday, 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time. We are looking at the New Jersey Generals taking on the Pittsburgh Maulers. And the Generals are massive favorites in this one here, and deservedly so, as the Maulers have not looked great so far. The Generals come into this one 2-1, as the Generals are now 0-3, struggling to find any real offense at all so far this year. Over-under sitting at 33 or 35.5, excuse me, with the Generals as -9.5 favorites. That's massive. That is probably the biggest favorite number I have seen so far. I don't think anything's crossed 10 yet, and 9.5 is as close as we've gotten. The Generals did a really good job capitalizing on the Stars last week after Scott went down, so respect to the defense for being able to adjust on the fly and ultimately take advantage of the backup coming in to get a big W to move on to 2-1. This week, they do face the Maulers, who this is a pretty good contest for the the Generals here to come out winners and move to 3-1, because when you look at what the Maulers have done defensively, they've allowed 20.7 points per game, which is second worst behind only the Gamblers defensively. And this is also the same team that's only scored 26 points, which is a league worst. So you're going up against a team who defensively lets people score at will and offensively can't really put up points themselves. Last week was a tough one. Put up 0 points when they went up against the Panthers. Oh my goodness, the Bandits. They put up only 3, and then they were able to muster up a handful of points going into that game against I forget who it was off the top of my head, but whoever it was they played last week in week number 2, they were able to put together a handful of points. So with that in mind, I mean, you look at the Maulers, they have a lot of work they need to do offensively. They got to get their ducks in a row if they want to have any shot of winning. Wide receiver Bailey Gaither, their lead wide receiver, has been moved to the inactive roster today. It was early this morning that they announced that, so he is out for another week with that injury he's dealing with. And you know, what was once at least a solid unit defensively is starting to trend in the wrong direction because the offense behind them just can't really seem to get things going for them. Hello, my cat. But ultimately, I think this is a shoe-in for the Gamblers, and not the Gamblers, excuse me, the Generals, and coming in at a scoreline of 23-10, I do take the Generals winning this one here. I do have the under as I have the total score at 33 points with the over-under sitting at 35.5, just because more so I think that the Generals can put up a fair amount of points, and I don't really trust the Maulers to do so, especially against this Generals defense here. I think that there is a strong possibility that this one ends up being more on the side of a blowout than anything else, just based off of where these two teams are currently. Moving on to game number 3. This is my game of the week. We are looking at the Tampa Bay Bandits going up against the Birmingham Stallions. And as I mentioned when we got into the beginning of this video, there is a little bit of a shakeup going on right now for Birmingham, as there is a massive wave of something running through the team. I don't know what it is. They have not mentioned what it is, but something has a handful of players sick. And early this morning, when they were doing their roster report for week number 4, an illness potentially keeping these players all out. They're all listed as questionable. Quarterback Jamar Smith, Scooby Wright, the linebacker, another linebacker, DeMarcus Gates, Kerry Angeline, tight end, Matthew Snow, an offensive lineman, quarterback Montel Cozart, so their backup for Jamar Smith, Chauncey Haney, defensive end, Lorenzo Burns, linebacker, and Bobby Holly, their fullback, all listed as questionable with this illness that's running through the team right now. Listen, the Stallions are 3-0. They're hot. All of their games have been come from behind victories, and they've found a way to win every single week. This is going to be a massive undertaking if they're going to be missing all these players. I'm assuming if Jamar Smith can't play tomorrow, it's going to be Alex Magoo, and I mean, you're losing 3 linebackers here. You have Scooby Wright, DeMarcus Gates, and Lorenzo Burns, and they've all been playmakers for the Stallions defense. You're losing your 3 main linebackers. Like, DeMarcus Gates is coming off a Defensive Player of the Week award. You're going to have a long game against a pretty good Bandits offense that is kind of starting to find its footing here. So with the streak in jeopardy and an illness running through the team, I'm a little bit concerned for the Birmingham Stallions here. Obviously, we'll know more tomorrow when we get into the game, but if they're listing all these players as questionable with an illness and they're all that sick that it needs to be reported like this, I'm a little bit concerned of what the starting roster is going to look like for tomorrow's game. Then the Bandits, coming off a grind of a W, they have a shot to knock off the only undefeated team left here, and with this illness thing going on, the tides seem to be turning in their favor pretty quickly. The Bandits defensively have been fairly solid with 268 yards a game allowed, which is actually second best in the league. With Jamar Smith potentially out and Alex Magoo starting, I will look for this defense to get very aggressive and be able to take advantage of the situation. And quarterback Jordan Teamu, who has been struggling a bit here so far to start the year, has finally kind of started to find his footing just this last week. 255 yards, a touchdown, and an interception to go with all of that. He did have an awkward fumble that was picked up by a lineman that thankfully saved the game, I would say, for the Bandits here. But it's good to see that Te'amu's kind of finally starting to get into a groove here as the teams start to mesh and get more comfortable. I assume that these quarterbacks are going to start to play better and better, and Te'amu is definitely well on his way with a really solid showing. If he can just get rid of the turnovers and the mistakes, this unit has a really solid chance of winning this game, especially when you consider the amount of players who might be out going into this one here. As for my final score, I'm basing it off the current situation right now that I'm recording at. I mean, who knows? Things could change in the next day, and I ultimately get this one wrong because of that. Gravy, what's going on, dude? How about my cat's just kind of in the way. Scoot, buddy. Thank you. But ultimately, I do have the Bandits winning this game here, 24-17, as I'm taking the over. The over-under sitting at 39.5, and the Stallions were favorites at the time of me recording this because it doesn't seem like the books have updated anything yet at -3.5. So I'm taking the underdog here because of the situation. Again, 24-17. I'm going with the over here. The over-under is at 39.5, and my point total equals 41. So I do like the over. I think that the Stallions should be able to get some things going. I think Magoo will be serviceable for the Stallions, and there's enough playmakers on the offensive side of the ball that they could probably keep the game close. But I do think the Bandits have a shot at taking advantage of them because you have all three of your playmaking linebackers out for this game, and I think that linebacking core is probably the strongest thing about that Stallions defense. That is definitely going to hurt. Even if you're missing just like two of the three guys, it's going to be an issue for the Stallions defensively. I like the Bandits here. And then going into the final game, this one is at Sunday, 3 p.m. Eastern time. We have the Houston Gamblers, who are 1-2, coming up against the New Orleans Breakers off of a tough loss to the Stallions last week, sitting at 2-1. Breakers are -5 favorites, and the over-under for this one is sitting at 41.5, the highest over-under total of the weekend. Breakers offense went missing in action last week as Kyle Sloter dealt with an injury that was clearly hampering him throughout the majority of the game. They were also missing TJ Logan, their running back, who with Jordan Ellis have become a very good tandem. Hopefully Logan can come back and they'll be able to run that duo, because as a running back tandem, those two are probably the best duo in the league, as not singular running back, but as a duo, I would say. We'll have to see how they fare going up against the Gamblers defense that has kind of been up and down. They're very aggressive at turning the ball over, but in terms of like numbers, they don't actually fare very well. So I will say, if there is one key to success here, the Gamblers are the first in pass protection. They have allowed only 3 sacks through 3 weeks here, whereas when you're looking at what the Breakers have done, 10 sacks the first 2 weeks. They only got 1 last week, so they're sitting at 11. This is the best pass rush that we have in the league. They need to be that best pass rush and force maybe 2, 3, 4 sacks, get Clayton Thorson uncomfortable, and try to game wreck this offense, because the way that the Gamblers' ground game works, and we'll start talking about them here, they struggle to put a full 4 quarters of football together, but that ground game led by Mark Thompson is a problem. They blew their lead last week. I cannot believe they didn't end up being the winners of that game. They were sitting 23-14 going into halftime, but ultimately, when push came to shove, they put up 3 points in the second half. The offense just kind of went missing there. The ground game is effective, don't get me wrong. I love what Mark Thompson does. He leads the league in rushing, but you got to be able to play 4 quarters of football, not just a really good first half and then just completely disappear the second half there, score 3 points and then let the Bandits rally for 14 and win the game. The Gamblers are the second worst in yards per game allowed at 373.3 yards, and the Breakers actually do have the second best offense in the league yardage-wise, forcing 337.3 a game. So this is definitely a mismatch defensively for the Gamblers. They will need to be opportunistic. They will need to force turnovers, like I mentioned. This is not a great defense, but they are good at forcing turnovers. They have 7 so far on the year, so they're averaging a little bit more than 2 a game. This is an opportunity for the Gamblers to get back to 500, and with a Breakers team that we don't really know where Kyle Sloter's health is at, if they're starting Kyle Sloter again and he's still dealing with that groin injury, the Gamblers do have a shot. I will say that. This offense for the Breakers was not the same with the way Kyle Sloter looked last week compared to the week prior when they were firing on all cylinders. Sloter was feeling good, and I'm assuming that injury came later in the game when the offense started to slow down a bit. let's see what happens. But as for my winner of this game, I do think it's going to be a little bit more of a higher scoring affair. I'm curious to see that, again, that Gamblers' offensive line and pass protection is really good. And if they can slow down the Breakers' pass rush, I could see the scores for this game as long as the Breakers' offense is clicking as well and Kyle Sloter isn't hampered with his injury. The scoreline getting pretty high here. The over-under is at 41.5. I have the Breakers winning this game here, and I have them winning at a score of 30-21. My main concern for the Gamblers is just the fact that they put together a strong couple of quarters, maybe 3, and then like they disappear at the end. I don't really know what happens with them if they're just running out of gas, whatever it may be. Clayton Thorson needs to keep the turnovers down. He did last week. Mark Thompson needs to continue running the ball behind. Honestly, at this point, you could probably argue that the Gamblers have one of the best offensive lines in the league. So with that in mind, I do like the Breakers. I have them winning 30-21. I'm taking the over, obviously. 30-21 musters up to 51 points altogether. That's about 10 points higher than the actual over-under that is being predicted here. So that is my pick for game number 4, and that is my picks for all 4 games of the week. I'm currently sitting at 5-7. Had a really tough 0-4 week this past week after going 4-0 the week prior. So with that in mind, 3-1, the week prior. So with that in mind, I started out 1-3, went 4-0, and then went 0-4. We're having a really strange year of picks so far. Let's hope that we're above 500 this week. I'm looking for 3-1. That's what I would like to get out of this one. But let me know again who you think is going to come out winners this week. That is my picks video. I appreciate you guys for watching. I will see you guys in the next one. Make sure you check out my draft grade videos. We're currently working through NFL draft grades as well. But that's it for me. Catch you guys in the next video. Have a good one.